Our following guest has a one thing at least in common with President Trump. They're both worth $9 billion. No, that's not it. Um, he's actually keeping some of the promises he made while campaigning. Jack Johnson, Twin Falls County Commissioner, is joining us in studio. One of the commitments he was making was that they would actually take some meetings to the public instead of just holding them at County West. And you did that just in the last couple of weeks out in the area around Buell, right? Because of the road conditions.
We did out in Castle Ford, and that was all of the commissioners are on board with that. And we had a community out there that was hit probably harder than the rest of our county with some of this, and we felt we needed to go out and talk to the community, and it turned out great. We had the commissioners there, we had highway districts that this impacted in that area there, as well as some highway district commissioners from that area. We had our parks department there. We had our disaster services. We had all the players in the game there to answer questions and ask people to please be patient. It's going to be a tough year, I think, in our road area.
I was
So
going to say, I heard Steve Millington describe that the road out there by Balanced Rock the other day, and how in some spots it's just asphalt and there's nothing beneath it any longer.
yeah, that was washed out the grade out there at Balanced Rock, which is really impacting people that live on the other side out in that Blue Gulch area. And because of that, there's always secondary problems that take place. A lot of those truck traffic and such out in Blue Gulch are having to reroute around to the
Hmm.
Magic Water grade, which now is putting more pressure on that road and breaking it up and tearing it up. And I know the Buell Highway District and Twin Falls Highway District, it's kind of a funny situation out there. Buell Highway District has half of that grade, Twin Falls Highway District has the other half of it. And they're working together to try and get that done, but it's probably going to be a 3-week project to get that where it's fully drivable again. And so, we continue to ask people to be patient, not just in that area, but county-wide, probably Magic Valley wide. Areas have been hit so hard that road infrastructure is suffering really bad.
I went out in your neck of the woods last Saturday. I drove out to Burley on Route 30, and the size of some of those holes in the road is, you can hear about it, but until you actually see it, it's the wow factor there. I mean, it's just incredible to see it.
Yeah, that and it's really weird that that section of Highway 30, has holes as big as it is. I mean, you talk about it'll swallow my car up, but there's some big holes out there, and it's odd that that section is as bad as it is when a lot of Highway 30 isn't that bad throughout our county. But it's definitely a problem area that ITD will be working on, I'm sure, as soon as they can.
You wanted to mention a big event coming up. On a happier note, potholes are not anything anyone really says, "Gee, Willikers, there's a great pothole over there." But you've got a happier event coming up, really to get people involved um, in a sort of social way, but also to by doing that to get them to network a little bit and maybe strengthen some relationships between business, government, and just common folks around the county.
Oh yeah. So April is county government month, and so the county typically has an open house in the lobby of the courthouse. It's, and of course, I haven't been there in years past, but my understanding is it's not a very well attended event. People don't get out there, and so we were looking at some alternatives to try and get the public a little bit more involved, the business community a little involved. And one of our elected officials brought up the fact of why don't we look into maybe hosting a business after hours at County West. Well, April's taken, but they had somebody cancel in May. The chamber did, and so we locked that date down on May 25th, and all of the elected officials are on board, think this is a great idea, and we're actually going to looking at expanding it just a little bit more than just business after hours. We're talking about maybe opening the doors at 4 in the afternoon for it, and inviting uh, some of our high school government classes, some of the college government classes, some of the younger generation out there in that first hour, hour and a half before the business community shows up, and the rest of the public, hopefully, and get some of our younger generation involved out there. And this was kind of just a cooperative effort with all the elected officials.
I was going to say it. for a lot of people out there who don't really have a good understanding of how government works, this is a good opportunity. I mean, a lot of people, you probably have heard some callers on the show before, and if they would just sometimes come to a meeting and ask you a question face to face, they could solve whatever ails them. If that's a good way to put that.
I think it would. Communication solves a lot of issues. We meet every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. in the commissioner's office for the agenda and whatever business, citizen business we have taken place. And, we want to be transparent. People are always welcome to show up there. One of the things that, both
Well, hold
commissioner,
on to that thought.
yes,
Hold on to the thought for a moment. We've got a short break coming
okay,
up. 48 right now. County Commissioner Jack Johnson in studio with us. We're about 20 minutes away at 9 o'clock. He's got a couple of other topics too, and we'll get back to this one as well. And if you have a question for him while he's here in the studio, feel free to give us a call in the next segment of the show at 736-0300. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Our studio guest, Jack Johnson, he's a commissioner here in Twin Falls County. One of two who are, I guess, what you'd call, well, freshman's not really I don't know. That sounds so schoolish, but uh, Jack Johnson and Don Hall have joined, of course, Terry Kramer
hmm
as on the three-member board. And we were just talking, and I had to interrupt you a minute ago, but about people and interaction.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit, I guess, about transparency. And one of the things Commissioner Hall and I noticed, and other people in the community notice, is the commissioner minutes that get posted on our website um, were a lot of times 3 or maybe 4 months before the public knew what was happening. And with the help of our administrative secretary in the office, we've pared that down where they're getting posted at least every couple of weeks. And so the county has a situation a little bit different probably than some others, but those meetings minutes have to be approved by the commissioners before they go out for public. So it's a work in progress, but we slimmed it from 3 months down to about 2 weeks, and we're still working on that. So
I wanted to point out, too, another big bit of news that's coming. And gosh, we talked about this, I think, in July or August of last summer, and that was a range, a county range. And at the time, we were looking for someone who might have some land where this could be done. And
mhm,
there's this, you can't just go out and say, unlike when I was a kid and dad would take you out shooting.
right.
In this day and age, you've got regulations and everything else, but it looks like something may be brewing here.
Well, we're working on it. And I can't put any details out, but we are working on trying to acquire. So the county has land that this would work on if we wanted to utilize it, but that's kind of a last resort. We're trying to acquire another piece of ground at no cost to the county that would really fit the needs and be probably a perfect place for a public shooting range to go into, and probably even accommodate the law enforcement needs. I know the city of Twin Falls, sometimes there's some issues with their range out there. And we can probably turn this into, there's enough land there to have a public shooting range, a law enforcement side for whatever departments wanted to utilize that, not just the sheriff's office. And and working together in mutual aid, I think that'd be great if we could turn something around on that. Um, so we're working on it,
Mhm.
and this could be something that, in 6 months we'll have an answer, and I hope it's not any longer than that. But we're working through that process to try and get that. And this is something that all three of the commissioners are on board with. All three of our commissioners want to see a public shooting range. When you get out to public ground, I'm a big, public ground person, rights, utilize our ground. Uh, the problem is a lot of times people go out there and they leave their trash behind and their beer bottles
Yep.
and their Target stands or whatever they hauled out there. A lot of times it's left there. And, that kind of reflects on everybody when that happens. It'd be nice for everybody to clean up what they took out with them on our public lands.
They never did that over in Jerome, though, especially while you were patrolling over there.
Well, I'd like to say that, but
We have a caller with us.
Mhm.
It's 846, and of course the telephone number 736-0300. Jack Johnson, he's one, of course, three Twin Falls County Commissioners in studio with us on Top Story. Caller, thank you for your patience. You're up next.
Yes, This isn't about anything to do with Mr. Johnson, but about the it's about the situation at Xavier. And a lot of times when things happen at school, they
Well,
get
make it quick
blown.
because I want to. Yeah, I don't want too much
Okay,
of my guest
they get
time.
blown out of proportion. I've got a granddaughter in that class, that very class, and the teacher actually, it wasn't duct tape, it wasn't masking tape, it was Scotch tape that she that she used.
Good to know.
And so anyway,
Well, thank you.
thanks.
Thank you for the input. Uh, we're talking education, which is not really an area that county commissioners get involved in.
Not a lot, that's usually our local school districts, and with the charter schools, a lot of times it also deals with the State Department of Education. So,
Right. And,
yeah,
the focus really of county government is very, very, I won't say it's narrow, but it does have its place. And unfortunately, too, though, when you mention the state government, a lot of that runs downhill because state gets a mandate from the federal government, and oftentimes that gets passed on from the state to the county government.
it does, and the cities. Counties and cities, it seems like bear a pretty good burden on a lot of the rules that we can't change.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of laws out there that we bear a burden on that we have don't have a lot of input on it. I'm finding that out. So
We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. That caller's from outer space. 7360300, 7360300. When you mentioned the range, and what we talked about the last time you were here on that particular subject, was that there's issues with, first of all, you almost need a berm or something, and there's issues with lead and contamination, and all these subjects come up. I read last week where Ryan Zinke, since he got appointed, what is it, Secretary of the Interior, he removed that rule about lead poisoning, the fears of lead poisoning from hunting, and also from, I guess, from people who are fishing too, as well, with their
with
sinkers.
sinkers.
But some of these issues still have to be addressed on the county level, I would imagine. We're talking anywhere where there's a firearm, there's going to be a lot of hoops that you got to jump through.
Right, right. And unless you're utilizing a portion of ground that's been through those hoops before, or is an established area for that, what happens is currently, and I don't know if this is going to change under the new administration, but uh, if you abandon a range and try to do anything else with it, you have to mine that lead out of the ground, and that's can be a pretty costly adventure. If something like that happens. So anytime you can move on without doing that, and you're in an area where that ground isn't contaminating any species of any kind, I think you're better off for it.
Old gas stations have that same
Mm.
regulation where they got to go out and dig up everything that where the tanks had been because of
Right,
potential leakage.
right,
See that at Five Points going on right now when I drive
right,
by there. We have
right.
another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. It's about 10 minutes from 9 o'clock. You're on the air with Jack Johnson. Go ahead.
Hi, I heard Jack say that there's a lot of things that the county and the city doesn't have control of, but one of the things they do have some say so on is their building code, and the Twin Falls Building Board has adopted the United Nations uh, building codes, and Twin Falls has never had a hurricane. We don't belong in the United Nations building code. We don't have to have 115-mile-an-hour tie down. We've never had 115-mile-an-hour winds. Isn't there something that the county commissioners can do to rein in our out of control building board?
Now, when you mention, I don't know if you're referring to the county planning and zoning's building codes or the cities. We're currently in the process right now. Matter of fact, I have a meeting right after this where we're going through a new draft on the county planning and zoning for our local ordinance control over that stuff. Now, we have adopted the state of Idaho's building code at the county because that's an accepted code, and and that's one of those areas that's in law. But when it comes to ag use or land use, parts that deal with our planning and zoning. We're in the process of looking over the current code and revising it where needed.
Well, the building board has told me that when they adopted that they did adopt the
But
Idaho
is that
building code.
let's be
And
clear.
that,
Is that the city board, caller? Is that the city board?
well, is there a difference? I'm in the county, and I had to go through them. We had one of the building inspectors stopped and gave us a cease and desist because we were trying to make a portable building, and they said that we had to have the title. Anyway, long story of it. But I wanted to just say that they adopted the Idaho Building Code, and Idaho State adopted United Nations. Is what they told me.
Okay.
And anyway, we need to get out of the United Nations.
Yeah, and I don't have any knowledge of that yet, but I'm willing to check into that and ask the question because I'm still learning a lot about this position and been in there about 2 months, but I will look into that and try and get an answer to that.
I will agree with him on his very last statement, but I don't know that you can necessarily order that.
We can't order the state not to adopt
Right.
something like that, but if that's the case, maybe we need to be talking to our legislators about some things. So
It goes back to when we were talking about how mandates get passed down.
yeah, and some of them we don't agree with, and until it's changed, we have to abide by those rules until they're changed. So
We have another caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air at 8:53 with County Commissioner Jack Johnson. Go ahead.
Hi, Jack. I have a comment on lead in the ground from either gun ranges. I've done a lot of research on that recently. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I've got involved in it quite extensively. There's a chemical way to neutralize all the lead on gun ranges that you don't have to mine it at all. It would help, but you don't have to do it because it can neutralize that. The biggest problem on gun ranges is not the lead, but it's the plastic wad that comes out. And I found this out through a gun shooting range in Bend, Oregon, who got into a major lawsuits. And they had a dickens of a time taking care of the plastic out of the wads. So the leads can be handled very easily. I know a lot about the Twin Falls Gun Club because I dealt with them and how to do with that. But also, there is a chemical out there that they use in agricultural that will neutralize lead and make it so you don't have to dig it all out and go through all that expense.
wow, that's
And,
interesting to know. I appreciate you bringing that
The
up.
reason I know all that, I talked to one of the top chemists in our whole country, and he was in Sun Valley, Idaho. It was Mr. Holding up at that owns Sinclair Oil, and that's what they did to neutralize their property and their gun club up at Sun Valley when they hauled it all out. And they had a dickens of a time, but being that they're an oil company, they could have the chemists to know how to neutralize that, and they did. And it's a very simple application, and it works because that's what they did. And I know a ton about all that. So
Well,
if anybody wants to talk about that, I guess, Jack, I can call you back when you're off the air and
yeah,
tell you about it.
come down and see me at County West if you have some time, and I'd love to talk with you about it.
Want to thank him for the call.
Yeah.
That's good news to know.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that in this job, I mean, the changes from going from, I suspect that there's some stresses of law enforcement that are always more so than you're going to find in a lot of other jobs. But I'm not going to sit here and say you've moved into an easy job by any means. There's got to be some challenges and some things, unexpected things that come about in a new job like this that maybe you don't always foresee as you're running for a job.
Well, there are, and I went into this because of all my years with county government. I'll be honest with everybody. I thought I probably knew 60% of what I was stepping into. Reality, it's probably 30 or 40%. It's lower than what I thought. There's a lot of cogs in the wheel that we have to learn about, and the regulations and ordinances, and sometimes if it's an ordinance, we can meet people part way on some things. But yeah, there's a lot to learn, a lot I didn't realize, and there are a lot of meetings, an awful lot of meetings. I don't know that most of our public knows that each one of their commissioners sits on about 10 to 12 community boards. and then also oversees about 4 different departments each. And so when you're not, actually doing the people's business in there, you're sitting on community boards, helping out, different nonprofit boards and or supervising different department heads in the county. And so there's a lot that's happening, and we're looking at I would like to be able to say we need to plan 50 years down the road,
Mhm.
with everything that's coming our way. And so, we're trying to look at a big picture with population growth and getting our comp plan for land use updated and looking at a strategic plan to help guide some of that. And there's just a lot of things that we're trying to work on.
I
So,
I know that Don said to me one time that before he got into government, when he was with the city, he knew nothing about wastewater treatment. But he said in a matter of years, you become very adept at knowing a lot about it because you have to. I mean, it's one of those challenges that come along, and before you know it, you're being briefed on it so often, and it's not anything people out there would say, "Gee, I want to be an expert in that someday," but it happens.
right. Yeah. And that's it. Different things come along, and, Commissioner Kramer sits on the solid waste district, and there's, been some things happening with that for a few years that are going to be coming to fruition. Yeah, you get an education in a lot of areas, even though if you're not directly involved in that as sitting on the board. So,
We want to thank you for coming by, and I'm going to guess we'll be talking again about at least the range and maybe some of these other subjects. We have to probably get an update on roads again sometime soon.
yeah, I'd love to come in and maybe come in before May to get the word out again on our business after hours. We really would like the business community and citizens and such to show up and
Well, this is an
support us on that.
all Murtaugh morning because Forrest Anderson is on the way in just a couple of minutes. He's going to be talking with us about firearms. In fact, an extension of that too this morning, just after news at 9 o'clock from Fox. It's 50 already. Isn't that good news?